Qin Haoxuan ascended to the throne on that day, and his beloved died on her way to see him. To maintain stability, I had someone conceal this news. As a result, with reddened eyes, he questioned me. You are already the Empress, yet you still envy and hate her, and even killed her. I sternly refuted him, but with no success. I could only watch as he personally destroyed the foundation we had worked nearly 10 years to build. In another lifetime. I did not suppress the news. Qin Haoxuan got to see his beloved and was in harmonious bliss with her. But what he didn't know was, the beloved he cherished was a spy from an enemy nation. And I was about to claim the throne. By killing her. Ding! RoyalStory reminds you to click the subscribe button in the bottom right corner to read the complete novel. An assassin broke into the Spring Palace on a snowy night. Amidst the falling snow, they massacred 35 attendants in the hall. Blood soaked the entire ground, making the red plum blossoms on the side appear even more vivid. The guards at the Spring Palace were fighting them at the entrance. In the chaos, I hid in the small kitchen. This is the royal palace, there will always be guards patrolling. It wouldn't take long for them to notice something unusual. When that happens, even if I have only one breath left, I will recount tonight's horrors to Qin Haoxuan and seek justice for the 35 attendants. Moreover, killing in the palace is a capital offense. Qin Haoxuan is my husband and the emperor of Great Qin country. He would never tolerate such things happening in the palace. I cowered under the stove, comforting myself, but the next moment, Qin Haoxuan appeared before me. All the blood in my body froze at that moment. Even if I were foolish, I knew what Qin Haoxuan's appearance in such a circumstance meant. Those killers were sent by him. Qin Haoxuan, with a cold face, had someone drag me out from under the stove and said with fierce and stern eyes, "Li Wanwan, today is your death day, I will finally avenge Yanran." Yanran? I repeated, bewildered. Yanran? I was stunned for a while, trying to remember who she was. Yanran, Xiao Yanran. She was the woman Qin Haoxuan met during his time as a hostage in L country 10 years ago. She had a beautiful appearance that left the young him utterly captivated. It was I who accompanied him, enduring hardships in L country. But the first thing he did upon returning to Great Qin country was to bring her back as his crown princess. At that time, the old emperor was still alive. He commanded me, "Li Wanwan, you have to eliminate her, or she will become a grave threat to you in the future." I hesitated, genuinely hesitated. I only kept Xiao Yanran outside the palace walls, secretly betrothing her to the young General Su Mayan of the Su family. He was the best choice, with good character and a noble background. I thought my painstaking arrangement was a win-win compromise. But on Qin Haoxuan's coronation day, Xiao Yanran inexplicably died on her way to the palace. I thought my explanations would be listened to by Qin Haoxuan. Yet, in the end, all the blame fell upon me without exception. Jealousy, hatred, and murder. Qin Haoxuan threw me into the snow, gesturing for the nearby assassins to proceed. He coldly laughed as he slowly stepped back. "Li Wanwan, you've been Empress long enough. Tonight's events are the work of enemies of the Li family, your death even more so." "Oh right, just today news came from the border, Li Zhong died in battle. With his death, I dared to act against you. With your death, your siblings will be powerless to defend themselves. Li Wanwan, sometimes a mighty structure can collapse overnight." I cried desperately, the pain in my heart surged forth. Li Zhong was my father. He was the great general who fought for Great Qin country on numerous battlefields for tens of years. The legacy maintained with his efforts would now be ruined by me. I crawled to Qin Haoxuan's feet, begging, "My family is innocent, please your majesty have mercy, all the mistakes are mine." Qin Haoxuan ruthlessly kicked me aside. I fell to the ground unexpectedly. Next came the spears aiming at me. When I opened my eyes again, the old emperor was looking kindly at me. "Li Wanwan, I appreciate you going to L country to accompany Haoxuan, he is not of bad character, just misled by others. Talk to him, and he will understand." I composed myself and responded, "Yes." But I was actually observing the room's furnishings peripherally. The jade table, wolf bristle brush, and the newly framed picture of a quiet night. I was reborn. Back to the 19th year of Great Qin Country, the year Qin Haoxuan, and I returned to Great Qin Country. The old emperor among his 5 sons chose Qin Haoxuan as the crown prince and selected me as the crown princess. Before the decree was announced, Qin Haoxuan had already voiced his opposition. Li Wanwan is a concubine's daughter, unfit to be my crown princess. His words were annoyingly presumptuous. The old emperor summoned him to the palace overnight, advised him emotionally and rationally, and made him apologize to me. In the end, it only brought Qin Haoxuan's question. Father, if Li Wanwan is the crown princess, then my beloved can only be a concubine? Such bold and rebellious words. The old emperor punished him by making him kneel outside the hall and summoned me to the palace. Everything was the same as in my previous life. He acted out a good show, his arrogant demeanor making all the princes drop their guard. Indeed, I was born as a concubine's daughter to Li Zhong, the great general. 5 years ago, L country suffered a major defeat. Qin Haoxuan was chosen as a hostage, and accompanying him was originally the eldest daughter of the prime minister, with whom he had a marriage arrangement. Everyone said this journey was a one-way trip. So, the prime minister's daughter fell seriously ill overnight. The old emperor was frantic and hinted to the noble families countless times. Whoever accompanied him would be favored by the throne. At that time, the Li family was in decline, my father was suspended and in distress. For the sake of the Li family, I requested an audience with the old emperor. I told him, although I am a concubine's daughter, your majesty needs me, and it doesn't matter about my status. I am willing to go, regardless of life or death. Please pardon my father. He is used to fighting, and if you stop him, he might not be able to take it. The old emperor agreed to my request. And that was the first time I met Qin Haoxuan. He had no smile, just a serious face. I told him, Your Highness, don't be afraid. I will protect you. L country was bitterly cold and barbaric people bullied us. I shielded Qin Haoxuan, taking the blows for him. Everyone thought we would marry in L country, but he fell in love with a L country girl. Xiao Yan ran. He even asked to make her the crown princess of Qin country. The old emperor publicly asked if I was willing to be Qin Haoxuan's crown princess. I knew that the court officials were all witnesses. I heavily kowtowed. I ask your majesty for a marriage decree. Instantly, there was a stir of discussions. Qin Haoxuan even snorted coldly. They probably all thought I truly wanted to be the crown princess. But I didn't. Before the old emperor could ask, I looked around the entire hall. Finally, my gaze fell on the young white-faced general in red official attire at the end of the military officials' line. I raised a smile and bowed slightly to the emperor. Your Majesty, I wish to marry Su Mayan. The crowd turned their questioning gazes toward him. Su Mayan snapped out of his daze, pointing at himself awkwardly. Huh? Marry me? The Su family was a martial family in the capital. They were once valiant, repelling L country and Z country several times, but later they declined until only Su Mayan was left of this generation. The old emperor was silent for a long time without saying anything conclusive. Instead, Qin Haoxuan laughed, kneeling and requesting, Father, isn't this better? Li Wanwan can marry another, and I too can marry someone else, a perfect solution. Shameless! The old emperor was furious, throwing a memorial at his face, kneel outside. The court officials were terrified and kneeled. Only Qin Haoxuan stood up nonchalantly, Father, I've suffered for 5 years in L country for you. Now, I can't even decide on a mere crown princess position. What kind of crown prince am I? More rebellious words followed. The old emperor was livid. I told you to kneel outside, didn't you hear? It was raining outside. The Empress summoned me to the harem for a word. She asked why I didn't want to be crown princess. Why I didn't want to marry Qin Haoxuan. I remained silent with my head bowed, and seeing this, the Empress had to let me go. Passing by the hall of mental cultivation, Qin Haoxuan was still kneeling. He was soaked through, his dark robes drooping to the ground. Even though he was drenched, he kneeled straight, and upon seeing me, his eyes slightly lifted, revealing a faint smile. It seemed Qin Haoxuan had something to say to me. I held my umbrella and walked to his side. Li Wanwan, Do you regret accompanying me to L country? His voice was light, mixed with the sound of rain and the tapping on the oiled umbrella. I crouched down to be at eye level with Qin Haoxuan. Does your highness remember, in L country, when you were punished to kneel, I kneeled with you? That was what I should do as a subject. The rain became heavier, soaking my dress. I looked earnestly at Qin Haoxuan for the last time and smiled, but whether I want to marry you and be the crown princess, that's my own decision. I think Qin Haoxuan understood my meaning. When I returned to the Li mansion, Su Mayan was waiting for me. Seeing me, he quickly approached. Miss Li, I don't understand your intention. We are not acquainted. Why did you say in court that you want to marry me? Not acquainted? In the past life, we were very familiar. During the spring exams, when I encountered bandits, he saved me. When traveling to the southern city, he protected me from danger. Knowing that Xiao Yanran came to the capital, with no one by my side, I sought him. General Su, please marry her. He didn't even ask why, just married Xiao Yanran. I deliberately summoned him to the hall and asked if he consummated the marriage with Xiao Yanran. His face turned red, telling me, Your Highness, your task for me was only to marry, not to consummate. Later, when Qin Haoxuan ascended the throne, I became the Empress. Qin Haoxuan was suspicious of him and sent him to the frontier with a decree. Actually, he didn't have to go. He was the last of the noble families and could enjoy a lifetime of glory and honor. But when Qin Haoxuan learned of Xiao Yanran's death, he investigated everything thoroughly. His suspicion grew deeper. So, Su Mayan met a tragic end on the way to the frontier. He was crippled, his face slashed, his eyes gouged out, and his body was thrown at the city gate. Qin Haoxuan had his body brought before me, and told me word by word. Empress, his death is your fault. It was your poisonous heart that caused his death. I collapsed in fear, followed by a heart-wrenching pain, tears flowing endlessly. Then, Qin Haoxuan took out a blood-stained letter from Su Mayan's chest and smiled. Empress, guess what's written in here? For the first time, I lost my composure and tried to snatch it, but Qin Haoxuan pushed me to the ground. He slightly curled his lips, opened the sticky paper without even looking at it, and waved it in front of me. Just as I was about to reach out and grab it, he quickly took it away. Tell me, how did Yanran die? How would I know? It wasn't my doing, nor was it Su Mayan's. I knelt on the ground and explained, Your father ordered me to get rid of Yanran, but I didn't act on it. General Su is innocent. Your Majesty can investigate. Investigate? Qin Haoxuan laughed. Fine, I believe you. I hadn't even caught my breath when I saw that he didn't stop. In an instant, he tore the letter to pieces. Su Mayan was a loyal and virtuous general. He shouldn't have fallen to his death because of me. There must be something important hidden in that letter. Even if it cost me my life, I would help him complete it. Ignoring Qin Haoxuan's obstruction, I scrambled on the ground to pick up the fragments. Piece by piece, I only saw 3 words. Marriage proposal process. His father and brother died in battle, and his mother and sister-in-law passed away early. With no one to teach him, he wrote a marriage proposal process to marry the girl he truly loved. This matter weighed on me like a heavy stone all my life. In this life, I must help Su Mayan marry the girl he loves. I straightforwardly asked, General Su, do you have a girl you fancy? His face turned red all of a sudden. Miss Li, what are you talking about? No matchmaker will help me discuss marriage. If I say I like a girl, it would tarnish her reputation. So there is someone, quite meticulous in observing propriety. I harbored a mischievous thought, ready to tease him when Yao Yao's voice reached from outside. My lady, Xiao Yanran has entered the capital. Good, the show is about to begin. This play was planned by me. Xiao Yanran is the crucial leading role. Qin Haoxuan received the news in less than a quarter of an hour. 3 grand carriages brought her from the city gate to Qin Haoxuan's villa in the city center. Qin Haoxuan was still locked up in the palace. So I went to see Xiao Yanran first. In L country, we rarely spoke. Most of the time, I watched her and Qin Haoxuan being intimately close. She was from L country, yet she was petite and delicate, with a palm-sized face and deep, soulful eyes. When she saw me, she still called me Wan Wan. Just like in L country, seemingly affectionate, but actually distant. We chatted about trivial things, and she suddenly asked, "Where's Haoxuan?" Finally, it came. Suppressing the turmoil in my heart, I looked a bit sorrowful. "He's being held by the Emperor because of you. We have been friends for years, I'll be honest with you. I also have someone I love. You've heard about it on your way here, haven't you?" Along the way, it was my people spreading the word. Even if she hadn't heard it, she should have by now. Sure enough, Xiao Yanran frowned slightly. "That noble general from the aristocratic family?" I nodded. "His Highness loves you, I love someone else. There's no way we can be husband and wife." She suddenly leaned over, peeking curiously through the door, then looked at me with surprise. "Wan Wan, is that your beloved?" "What beloved?" My act was abruptly interrupted, so I peeked outside in frustration. The man in white attire was none other than Su Mayan. Why did he come? I nearly gritted my teeth, yet kept smiling. "It's indeed him. I had him follow to show him to you." Xiao Yanran softly said, "Then you should invite him in, it's raining outside." Before I could nod, Xiao Yanran had already opened the door herself, with a gentle smile. "General Su, hello. Wan Wan just mentioned you. I was curious, when will you send betrothal gifts to marry Wan Wan?" The play hadn't even started, and she was already probing. Hiding behind Xiao Yanran, I made frantic gestures at Su Mayan. But Su Mayan, with a wooden face, still politely greeted us. I was afraid he would spill the beans. Rushing in front of him, I hugged his arm tightly. In the next moment, Su Mayan calmly extricated his hand and said to me, "Miss Li, men and women should not touch each other." Defeated before even taking the field. I stood there, stunned, meeting Xiao Yanran's amused gaze. She was an expert in reading people's expressions, which is why Qin Haoxuan was so taken with her. Thinking of Su Mayan's kindness in my past life, I couldn't help but scold him mentally. Just at that moment, Su Mayan bluntly said, "Miss Li and I are not engaged, nor has the Emperor granted permission. It's reasonable that men and women should keep their distance, isn't it?" The rhetorical question left Xiao Yanran speechless. She had followed Qin Haoxuan secretly for 5 years, enduring countless rumors and gossip. Those words undoubtedly slapped her in the face. I seized the moment. "Yanran, His Majesty is kind-hearted. He just can't bring himself to call off this engagement. Now that His Highness is still confined in the palace, 3 days later, there's a welcoming banquet. You only need to tell the Empress that you are pregnant. And with the marriage decree I asked for these few days, His Majesty will have an excuse." Xiao Yanran looked troubled, "But I am not pregnant." "No worries," I whispered. "I know of a miraculous medicine in the market that can fake pregnancy, not even a gynecological expert could detect it." She bit her lip, seemingly struggling. Su Mayan straightforwardly said, "Miss Xiao, if you don't succeed, you perish trying." I almost burst out laughing. I've finally figured it out. Su Mayan is cunning on the inside, with a sincere face, hiding his mischievous nature perfectly. Passing by the old matchmaker's temple, I made my usual prayers and drew a lot. 2 bright stars shine in the sky, meeting the bridge of magpies by the year's end. Luck and fate's hand hold tight, bringing the destined lovers together. It was indeed a very fortunate lot. I leaned over to see Su Mayan's fortune, but he stopped me. "Miss Li, it's impolite to peek." I recalled his reaction in front of Xiao Yanran earlier, and asked curiously, "How did you know I was setting a trap for her?" "Setting a trap?" he exclaimed. "I don't understand, I was just following your lead." This is, indeed, wisdom concealed under simplicity. Yes, it must be so. The old emperor confined Qin Haoxuan for 2 days, and only released him on the 3rd. As soon as he left the palace, he hurried to the other estate. He didn't even notice when his horse brushed past my carriage with his prized steed. The Empress summoned me for yet another lecture. "Wan Wan, I've discussed with Haoxuan. He agrees to take you as the crown princess, but there is one condition: he needs to accept Xiao Yanran as a concubine." I covered my face and broke into tears. "Your Highness, Xiao Yanran is already pregnant. How long have the crown prince and I been back in Great Qin country?" She's chased us down here out of sheer desperation because she's pregnant and cannot hide it anymore. Xiao Yanran is cunning and scheming. What use is it for me to become the crown princess? It would be better to be a concubine. I knew the Empress would investigate me. Yet she could never uncover what I had discussed with Xiao Yanran. According to her investigation, I went to see Xiao Yanran, and Xiao Yanran told me about her pregnancy. With full skepticism, I took her to a doctor. The Empress's expression changed several times. Seeing that she couldn't keep this from me, she merely said, "Wan, I understand. You may leave the palace now." Everything was going smoothly. Xiao Yanran wouldn't tell anyone about her fake pregnancy. It was her only means to get close to Qin Haoxuan. However, the old emperor wasn't one to tolerate such deceit. He was merely hypocritical. The next day, Qin Haoxuan reluctantly came to the Li mansion to fetch me. He looked as cold as he did when he was sent to L country as a hostage. I asked if he remembered being beaten so badly he couldn't get out of bed, and even had a high fever at night. He turned his head to look at me. "Li Wan, what do you want to say?" I lowered my eyes, laughing softly. "Back then, I held your highness's cold hands. They were like ice, and I prayed silently to the heavens, asking not to take your life but mine instead." Qin Haoxuan seemed moved, clasping his hands tightly together for a moment before quickly letting go. I kept smiling. I once cared for him wholeheartedly, yet he killed me and Su Mayan for a crime that never existed. Fine, I'll falsely accuse him too. The banquet was filled with toasts and cheers. Everyone celebrated this returning prince of great Qin country who would soon become the crown prince. He didn't resort to any tricks. But the rest of the princes were truly disgraceful. Indulging in all vices, only Qin Haoxuan remained somewhat dignified. Xiao Yanran was brought into the palace by Su Mayan's men. Amid swirling drinks and jests, he gave me a subtle nod. At that moment, the poignant sound of a huqin silenced the lively reception. Everyone looked to see who was playing the instrument. Even the old emperor on the high platform frowned. Qin Haoxuan seemed to realize who it might be. Just as he moved to intervene, Xiao Yanran appeared before everyone. Her face pale, eyes filled with tears. The sorrowful tone of the huqin perfectly accompanied her. The old emperor erupted in anger, pointing a trembling hand at Xiao Yanran, "Who brought her here? Drag her out and execute her." The huqin abruptly ceased, its string snapping. Xiao Yanran fell to her knees, begging in a panic. Qin Haoxuan also knelt down. "Father, she is the Yanran I've mentioned to you. She only played the huqin because she found its music beautiful, without knowing any other significance." "She didn't know, but did you?" The old emperor swept the dishes off the table angrily. "Do you not know how many soldiers we lost in Great Qin due to L country? They would play the huqin before heading into battle. You stayed in L country for 5 years, are you not aware?" The continuous questioning left Qin Haoxuan speechless. Who dared to speak amidst the emperor's wrath? Drag her out and execute her, hang her corpse at the city gate for 3 days. Before he could finish, Xiao Yanran threw herself forward. "Your Majesty, I'm pregnant." She choked on her tears. "It's the third prince's child." The whole hall was in an uproar. The third prince was Qin Haoxuan. A trace of surprise quickly crossed his expressionless eyes. His face turned icy, and his long fingers turned white with pressure, as he resolutely shouted, "I beg of you, father, to spare Yanran." It seemed Xiao Yanran had been hesitant about the fake pregnancy and hadn't informed him. I sneaked a glance at Su Mayan in the distance. Coincidentally, he too was looking at me. We exchanged a glance and then looked away in tacit understanding. Now the arrow had to be released. The pregnancy news became Xiao Yanran's lifeline, and she kept repeating, "Yes, it's the third prince's child. I intended to raise it secretly, but there's no way now. Please, Your Majesty, spare my humble life for the child's sake." Qin Haoxuan was also pleading. The old emperor wavered and barely managed to stand upright by holding onto the dragon head ornament. The empress beside him stood up to support him, her sharp eyes scanning the surroundings like blades. After a long while, she said loudly, "Third Prince Haoxuan has not been properly disciplined, he will receive 10 lashes. As for you, Xiao Yan ran. The Empress paused, send her to the Mingxi Hall and have the imperial physician look after her. Mingxi Hall is not a cold palace, but might as well be. It's located remotely and is said to be in ruins. The Empress summoned me for a private audience. She asked me to wait. This time, I finally mustered the courage to ask her why I must be the crown princess. She sighed and said that my father, Li Zhong, had made many great contributions in recent years. The support of the crown princess's family should be worthy of the crown prince, which fits me perfectly. There's actually another reason. My father is a new noble, easier to control. Moreover, I accompanied Qin Haoxuan to L country for 5 years. Becoming the crown princess would be a natural course, supported by public opinion. After leaving the palace, Su Mayan was waiting for me at the city gate. I feigned indifference and greeted him, "Greetings, young general." He wrinkled his face, "Miss Li, please don't tease me." I couldn't be bothered to tease him any further and asked what he wanted to see me about. The streets were desolate, only the sound of carriage wheels could be heard. The moonlight gently bathed the earth, and I stepped on Su Mayan's shadow, urging him to speak plainly. He stopped and seriously said, "Miss Li, I suspect there's a spy inside the city." "Oh, that I already knew. The spy is Xiao Yan ran." In the previous life, Su Mayan had also reported this to me. I had originally wondered why L country always claimed victory in battles. It turned out there had been a spy in the city all along. But in the previous life, she was still outside the palace, receiving limited information. Now she's been confined inside the palace. Even though it's the most remote Mingxi Hall, there are still some differences. Anyway, everyone in this palace has long been corrupted. The old emperor was hypocritical and suspicious, constantly waging wars and causing chaos over the years. During the 5 years in L country, even though they held hostages, they still couldn't avoid provocations from the Great Qin. Whenever the Great Qin attacked, I would have to take the beatings for Qin Haoxuan. After years of repression, Qin Haoxuan had changed from the cold young man of the past into a truly suspicious ruler. If he ascended the throne, his doubts would only surpass those of the old emperor. Instead of answering Su Mayan, I asked, "Did you arrange for Xiao Yan ran to play the Huqin tonight?" Young general, impressive tactics. The fake pregnancy was just the trigger. With the old emperor's suspicion, she would be confined to the palace no matter what, but it wouldn't have been by a furious order from the Empress. The Huqin completely shattered Xiao Yanran's dreams of becoming the crown princess. "It wasn't me," he said softly. "Then who was it?" I asked again. He suddenly leaned in close. "If I merely hinted that His Majesty enjoys music, does that count as my tactic?" All right, I understood. This was what they call clever feigning of ignorance. The fake pregnancy medicine's effect would only last a month. Within this month, no matter how the imperial doctor examined, he would only find a slippery pulse. But after more than a month? Surely, Xiao Yanran would be even more anxious than I was. I heard she constantly complained of stomach pains. The imperial doctors found nothing, but her complaints eventually made Qin Haoxuan flip the walls of Mingxi Hall. The two of them were oblivious to the world, intertwined. Thus, Xiao Yanran had a miscarriage. It was quite amusing. She was faking her pregnancy. How could she have a miscarriage? Somehow, this scandal became the talk of the capital. People said Qin Haoxuan was lustful and ungrateful, not fit for the role of crown prince. The old emperor fainted from anger on the spot. The Empress summoned me to the palace again, asking me to serve before him. Qin Haoxuan was there with me. His eyes were red, looking very distressed. I whispered deliberately, "Is Yanran all right?" He bit his lower lip and only looked up at me after a long while, pleading, "Wan, please say in front of everyone that you're willing to be the crown princess. You and I returned from L country together, no one is more suitable for this role." Really? Who was it that once said I was born of a concubine and couldn't be the crown princess even if I matched the contributions of the Li family? What game were they playing now? They wanted me to be a scapegoat for paving the way for Xiao Yanran. I changed the subject. "Your Highness, how is Yanran?" Wan. Qin Haoxuan pressed his lips tightly. "I have never wronged you. In L country, I always treated you with respect. Now I only ask you to be my crown princess." Is it really so hard for you? I laughed coldly. The old emperor was still unconscious on the bed. I slightly curled my lips and glanced at Qin Haoxuan. I will agree to your request before everyone. Before Qin Haoxuan could breathe a sigh of relief, I continued, 3 days. I will only give you 3 days. Oh no, I'm sorry for my disrespect, I bowed. It is your highness who asks me to be the crown princess. In that case, I naturally has conditions. I accompanied your highness to distant ill country for 5 years, fully deserving of being the crown princess. My Li family has served the great Qin and ensured the safety of the people, yet because I am born of a concubine, I face criticism. Presumptuous. Qin Haoxuan pointed at me, his face contorted with anger. Li Wanwan, do you know what you are saying? His voice trembled with rage. I lifted my chin. I demand a 10-mile-long corridor. Your highness must publicly admit your fault. Of course, I knew what I was saying. The scandal involving Xiao Yanran had become a huge controversy. The dignity of the royal family no longer existed. The hypocritical old emperor loved his reputation. To quell the rumors, the best solution would be to randomly charge Xiao Yanran with a crime and kill her. For instance, accuse Xiao Yanran of being a spy. And for Qin Haoxuan to protect Xiao Yanran, he could only try to appease the old emperor. The old emperor was determined to make me the crown princess to show the royal family's benevolence. Therefore, Qin Haoxuan couldn't wait to make me the crown princess, and it had to be me agreeing to it in front of everyone. This was the first reason. The second reason was even simpler. Qin Haoxuan declared publicly that he would not marry me, attributing everything to the royal family's mistake. If I said I was willing, it would be seen as forgiving him. Thirdly, my father and brother had made great achievements on the border. They captured a small unit that launched a midnight raid from L country. Under pressure, their leader boasted that dozens of spies had infiltrated into Qin territory, and internal collapse was imminent. The news reached the capital, and despite his illness, the old emperor mustered the strength to approve reports. For several days, suspected spies were being eradicated, and people were in a state of panic. I managed to find some time to relax, hiding at home every day, playing with birds. However, Su Mayan often climbed over the walls to visit me. I told him, young general, this is not appropriate, men and women should keep their distance. He imitated me and replied, this is in private, so who cares about etiquette if no one sees us? I was always a lively person. In my past life, I accompanied Qin Haoxuan to L country for 5 years. After returning, I became the crown princess, and later the empress. I suppressed my nature and gradually became someone else. Until everyone forgot I was once a girl who loved to laugh and joke. Only with Su Mayan could I slightly lower my guard. This bit of relaxation carried over from my past life into this one. Su Mayan seemed to notice something different about me. He sipped his tea and asked, Miss Li, are you still thinking about becoming the crown princess? I nodded. He lowered his eyes. Miss Li really wants to be the crown princess? I couldn't help but laugh and turned my head to look at him. If I told you, in my past life I was an empress, would you believe it? I would. He held the teacup in both hands. No matter what Miss Li says, I will believe it. His eyes were as clear as the stars in the sky when he looked at people. I asked again, then if I told you, I have feelings for you, would you believe it? He was stunned. Just at that moment, Yao Yao came shouting from outside, Miss, the third prince is coming to the Li residence, bowing every few steps. Bowing every few steps. Interesting. I was about to leave when Su Mayan called out to me, Miss Li. He seemed very nervous, with a thin layer of sweat on his forehead. I knew what he wanted to say, so I stopped him, young general, I'm off to watch a good show. You leave through the back door. Outside the Li residence, a crowd had gathered. Sure enough, Qin Haoxuan was bowing every few steps. It was truly terrifyingly sincere, for the sake of Xiao Yanran. I stood at the gate of the Li residence, watching him. Almost every step he took was cheered by someone. Of course, there were also people who looked down on him. But I knew that when the old emperor learned everything, he would only praise Qin Haoxuan for his great progress and sense of propriety. After all, the royal family's reputation always needed someone to fix it. When he finally reached me, he apologized word by word and asked me to marry him, sincerely recounting the days we spent in El Country, saying how I took care of him without sleep and how he took care of me without loosening his clothes. Then, he presented a token of love in front of everyone. It was a finely crafted jade pendant. People surrounded us from all sides, everyone eagerly watching for my reaction. I caught a glimpse of Su Mayan outside the crowd. I smiled slightly and told him word by word, "Your Highness, I am unwilling." A layer of thin anger spread across Qin Haoxuan's face. "Li Wanwan, what did you say?" I said. I spoke calmly, "I am unwilling to marry your Highness. I requested an imperial marriage decree long ago. I wish to marry the Su family's young general." The crowd erupted. Qin Haoxuan lowered his voice, "Li Wanwan, that day you didn't say this to me. You said I needed to publicly admit my mistake. Your Highness, do you remember when you fell off the cliff?" I suddenly asked. There was a flicker of panic in his eyes. "Li Wanwan, why bring that up?" That was when he met Xiao Yanran. Once, he got deceived by a noble from El Country and was seriously injured and unconscious in the mountains. Xiao Yanran carried him back step by step. He was so grateful that he vowed to marry her. But all of this was wrong. He still held the small box containing the jade pendant in his hand, and I reached out to close it. "Your Highness, that year in the heavy El Country snow, it was me who used a rope to tie you to my back and carry you back. The snowy road was really hard to walk. I fell countless times, the rope almost strangling me to death, my palms were rubbed raw by the rope, but I never thought of giving up on your Highness. Your Highness, once a sincere effort yields nothing, there will never be a second effort. Moreover, in my past life, you killed me, slaughtered my Li family, and executed Su Mayan. No matter what, it was all wrong." Qin Haoxuan, as if waking from a dream, grabbed my hand. He spread my palm open. Scars crisscrossed my hands, horrifying to see. Even though I had used the best ointments, it still couldn't hide the past wounds. A cold wind howled past. Qin Haoxuan held my hand, trembling, and with a plop, a tear fell on my wrist. I looked at him in surprise. But all I saw was his panicked back. That night, Xiao Yanran was thrown into prison. I heard it was Qin Haoxuan who personally locked her up. How could there be a beautiful peasant girl on that remote mountain? After severe torture, Xiao Yanran bit her tongue and committed suicide. Her corpse was hung on the city gate for public display. Thus, Xiao Yanran finally died. I couldn't be sure how much information about Qin country had been transmitted to El country by her. But soon, war came. El country allied with S country and launched simultaneous attacks on the eastern and southeastern parts of Qin territory. The situation was dire, and despite his illness, the old emperor appointed several generals to immediately lead troops to support. Su Mayan volunteered to lead the expedition. The day of departure was a snowy day. I couldn't help but think of the previous life, anxiously checking the items he carried with him. Don't listen to strangers. If you encounter someone you can't beat, just hide. If that doesn't work, run. Make sure to wear your heart-protecting mirror. The battlefield is unlike other places, swords and knives have no eyes. Su Mayan smiled. "Miss Li, I know. Take care of everything." Snowflakes fell thick and fast. I reached out to catch a snowflake. It was icy cold and quickly melted in the palm of my hand. "Miss Li, if..." Hearing Su Mayan speak, I turned to look at him only to see him slightly nervous, pinching his fingers, trying to hide his unease. "If I return victorious, can I ask for your hand in marriage with a proper matchmaker and 10 miles of red bridal sedan?" I was stunned. Suddenly, a thought came to mind. Ignoring propriety, I reached into his bosom. He wanted to stop me, but it was too late. I had already grasped the letter in my hand. It was the marriage proposal process stained with blood that I couldn't see clearly in the previous life. At this moment, it appeared before me. A daring thought emerged in my mind. I asked, "Young general, have you loved only me from the beginning to the end?" He nodded firmly. I wanted to laugh, but tears couldn't stop streaming down. Before I even noticed him, he already liked me. Whether it was this life or the previous life. His heart beat only for me. But exactly when did he start to fall for me? I couldn't stop thinking about it as I returned to the Lee mansion. In the previous life, the first time I saw him was during the spring exams, when bandits rushed in, and he shielded me behind him, telling me, "Your Highness, be careful." The bandits were fierce and brutal. He was seriously injured while protecting me. Qin Haoxuan arrived late and only ordered the bandits' execution without further investigation. Now that I think about it, those bandits were probably sent by Qin Haoxuan to kill me. I must avenge the deep hatred I have with Qin Haoxuan. Yao Yao urged me to sleep. As soon as the candle was out, someone suddenly pounced on me down on the bed. Under the cold moonlight, I saw the person's face clearly. It was none other than Qin Haoxuan. He pressed his hand firmly over my mouth, the other hand urgently groping my body. A strong smell of alcohol flooded over. The gap in strength between men and women was vast. No matter how hard I fought, I couldn't pry his big hand open. I whimpered, "Qin Haoxuan, have you gone mad?" Hearing that, he stopped his movements and looked at me. A smile slowly emerged in his somber eyes. He buried his head in my neck, his hand untying my belt, muttering, "I am mad. Seeing you go to bid farewell to Su Mayan, I actually felt jealous. Li Wanwan, you were always supposed to be mine. How could you marry someone else? How could you leave me? Back in L country, I liked you, but Xiao Yanran was scheming, and you didn't tell me. I couldn't tell the difference at the time. I was just blinded. When you were lying beside me, we were only separated by a small gap. Li Wanwan, I truly liked you." It seemed like he was repenting. But what meaning does all this have to me now? In the previous life, I was already numb. I had shown him my true heart, but he threw it away, making me completely give up. I only wanted to protect the Li family, and the Li family couldn't be without an empress to hold the fort, so I endured and endured. In this life, I am very clear. I like Su Mayan. Those secretly heartfelt moments from the previous life can now be openly cherished in this life. Qin Haoxuan belatedly sensed my calm. He lifted his head to look at me, his heavy breathing particularly evident in the silence. I cried, tears streaming down my face. Qin Haoxuan incredulously released his grip on me and was about to get up. I had already stabbed the dagger into the back of his neck. He screamed in pain, attracting the Li family's guards. Yao Yao shrieked, rushing over to protect me. I choked out, "Inform father, the third prince nearly defiled me. His conduct is disgraceful, unworthy to be crown prince. Petition the ministers, the world will not tolerate him." Qin Haoxuan, now mostly sober, clutched the wound on his neck, slumping painfully to the ground. The matter stirred up a huge commotion. The old emperor, dragging his sick body, summoned me. He reasoned with me sternly and mildly, having a heart-to-heart talk. In the few months apart, he had aged significantly, but I knew he didn't dare to act against me. The border was at war, and he still needed the support of military generals. There was also a plague in some regions, requiring funds and support from civil officials. In such a tumultuous time, he preferred to avoid more trouble. Finally, he asked me, "Wanwan, do you really not want to be the crown princess?" I bowed my head and smiled gently, "Your Majesty, who in the world wouldn't want to be in a high position? It's just that, I don't want to be Qin Haoxuan's crown princess." Qin Haoxuan's recent conduct was seen by everyone. Bringing spies into the city, publicly humiliating and almost violating someone who had shared hardships. The people were outraged by his misconduct. How could someone with such poor morals be the crown prince? The flickering candlelight made the old emperor's face look indistinct. After serving him his medicine, he suddenly asked me, "Then who do you think, among my 5 sons, could be the crown prince?" A dragon begets 9 sons, each different. But the old emperor's 5 sons were all disappointing in their own ways. I stepped back a few paces and knelt to salute. "Perhaps, your Majesty has more than 5 sons." It wasn't a question, but a confirmation. When the old emperor was young, he was dashing and had favored a palace maid. After giving birth, the maid died, never receiving promotion or title. Without promotion, bearing a dragon child was still a common occurrence. The child was left in the palace and was picked up by a noble. The old emperor asked suspiciously, "How do you know this?" "I heard rumors among the common folk, Your Majesty." I bowed my head. "If Your Majesty is angry, punish me with a beating. If Your Majesty is interested, you can look into it. Another option wouldn't hurt, Your Majesty." After being sent out of the palace, I went to the Sioux residence. An elderly steward greeted me and took me on a tour of the Sioux residence. Just as I imagined. The sparse furnishings immediately indicated it was a place inhabited by men. In my previous life, even though I held the position of Empress, I could only suppress my longing to see this place. It was the old steward who approached me, asking for my help in redressing the grievances of Su Mayan. His Majesty is suspicious by nature. He must have known the young master's true identity to order his assassination. Su Mayan's identity? I asked in surprise. The old steward wept bitterly. The young master was taken from the palace by the Sioux family general years ago. After much investigation, it was discovered that he is the late emperor's son. The late emperor's son. That means he is the old emperor's son. The current emperor's 5 sons are all useless. I heard that Qin Haoxuan has been incessantly worried, fearing he would miss the decree to be named crown prince. I spent my days at the Li residence, reciting scriptures and praying for blessings. We waited and waited until the news of a great victory at the frontier arrived. It said that the old emperor was so overjoyed that he drank a few glasses and passed out. The Empress summoned me to the palace to attend to his illness again. She had no sons of her own and did not favor anyone, genuinely caring for the old emperor. She told me, "Wan, you're a good child. I've always wanted you to be my daughter-in-law, and Mayan will be back soon." Her words were very clear. The old emperor had already thoroughly investigated everything. All that was left was for Su Mayan to return. March 3rd, Spring Imperial Examination. I saw Qin Haoxuan, his face sullen amidst the cups and dishes. Someone reported that General Li had arrived 10 miles outside the city. The old emperor nodded, "Let Li Zhong come directly to see me." As that person was about to leave, the old emperor called him back, and Su Mayan, "Bring him along." Qin Haoxuan's eyes darkened, and he stood up to leave. I suddenly had a bad feeling. After explaining hurriedly, I quickly drove the carriage out of the examination hall. I had to see my father and Su Mayan with my own eyes to be at ease. But just as I crossed the street, I saw a soldier in armor, covered in blood, riding a horse and shouting, "The Li family's army has been ambushed, requesting assistance from the capital." The Li family's army. Doesn't that mean my father? Su Mayan was supposed to come back with my father. The horse seemed frightened, rearing and neighing, causing me to fall to the ground. Pain surrounded me, tears gathering in my eyes, but I gritted my teeth and stood up, step by step moving forward. In my previous life, my father died tragically. Su Mayan's fate was even more miserable. Qin Haoxuan's ruthless methods were evident. As I walked, my legs gave way, and I fell in front of the old matchmaker's temple. The gods were merciful, and the matchmaker smiled. Guided by some unseen force, I held onto the wall and walked into the temple, all my hopes turning into prayers. I don't know how long it had been when suddenly, it darkened beside me. I heard the clanking of armor and a familiar voice. "Miss Li, it's been a long time." I opened my eyes suddenly, seeing the person I had longed for day and night, Su Mayan. He was darker and thinner. His posture was as straight as a pine tree, his aura as powerful as the sun, his starry eyes under his sharp brows shining brightly. He looked like he used to, yet different. He smiled, "Don't be afraid, we have captured Qin Haoxuan." So Qin Haoxuan had indeed uncovered all the truths, gathering all his trusted followers for a final desperate attempt. At first, the Li family's army was indeed caught off guard. But being seasoned warriors, they soon regained their footing and captured Qin Haoxuan. He cursed both Qin Haoxuan and the old emperor all the way. Qin Haoxuan had already been sent to the palace. It seems the old emperor had long despised him. I cried uncontrollably. Su Mayan reached out to wipe my tears, and gently said, "When I first met you, you were also crying." The first time? In this life, our first meeting was in the main hall when I told the old emperor I wanted to marry him. I was righteous and playful, not crying. Seeing my confusion, he smiled lightly. Miss Lee, our connection transcends just one lifetime. I was stunned. In an instant, I understood what he meant. Like me, he had also been reborn. After my death, I returned to the time when you and Qin Haoxuan were coming back from El Country. Seeing my confusion, Su Mayan placed the marriage proposal letter he had kept close to his heart in my hand. I sincerely ask for your hand, with heaven and earth as witnesses, using the sun and moon as matchmakers, for the sake of our connection. So tell me, when did you start liking me in our past life? I murmured. He clasped his hands together. It started raining outside, the wind blowing in. Memories I had forgotten flooded back. In our previous life, right after I returned from El Country. Upon learning that Qin Haoxuan didn't want to marry me, I ran crying to the old matchmaker's temple. Incense burning, amidst the wisps of smoke. Our eyes met briefly. That was our destined bond. Under the old emperor's benevolence and might, no minister dared to speak against it. Su Mayan was officially named the crown prince. The old emperor fell into a coma for several days, his health failing, and even the empress fell ill from attending to him overnight. The day before I was to truly become the crown princess, I went to see Qin Haoxuan. Punished for numerous crimes, I added one of colluding with El Country on purpose, and he was imprisoned in the dungeon. After all, only he and I knew about the events in El Country. Su Mayan understood my hatred. He requested an order from the old emperor to grant Qin Haoxuan poison wine. Officially, Su Mayan was the executioner, but in reality, I was the one who brought him his final drink. His hair disheveled, his mind somewhat unclear. Seeing me, he was slightly stunned, then laughed softly. I had longed to let him experience the pain of being pierced by countless spears as in our previous life. But on second thought, poison wine was also good. He wouldn't die immediately. I could watch as black blood flowed from his mouth, his limbs convulsing, dying slowly. Very good. Indeed, very good.